Thank you, Pablo. So I think we are ready, and we have a good number of participants also, already 24. And as we start, maybe some colleagues will join us. So thank you. Our thanks to the network for providing us with this opportunity to share with you what we are doing here in Kazakhstan. My name is Afzal Tajik. I'm a faculty here at Nazarbayev University, Graduate School of Education. Both Professor Manan and I come from Pakistan. A similar, context as far as EMI is concerned. Though Pakistan being a colony to British Empire in the past, English started much earlier than here in Kazakhstan. Professor Manan, do you want to say a few words about yourself? Then we can start.
Hi, everybody. Good morning and good afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you very much. We appreciate your support in this regard, and we are looking forward to sharing our insights about whatever we have witnessed, whatever we have documented in our research. So my name is Syed Abdul Manan, as Professor Mir has pointed out. I belong to Pakistan, but here I work as associate professor in the School of Graduate School of Education, particularly in the multilingual education program. So,
okay,
thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Let me share our screen. Okay. So I will walk you through the study design, how we actually approach this study, where the motivation came from, and then Professor Manan can come and share, some of the findings and the implications for policy. So this is a 3-year research project. We started in 2021, actually. Funded by Nazarbayev University. We have a research grant called NU Collaborative Research Grant. So part of this grant, it's a very competitive grant. We can work with 1 or 2 other universities in Kazakhstan. So we were lucky to find, Suleiman Demirel University in Almaty. When we started at that time, Professor Davran was the rector of that university. So I'm happy to see Davran here in the audience. And we also have a colleague from Kimap University, which is also in Almaty. So 3 universities are collaborating. Within Nazarbayev University, we have Professor Manan, myself, we have 1 more colleague, and we also have colleagues from School of Humanities and Sciences. So it's a pretty large team and 3-year study. We were supposed to conclude this project in December last year, but because we still have some money left, and also we want to do some more investigation based on the findings that we have got. So we requested for 1-year extension, and the university has kindly granted us 1-year extension. So this year we will be completing this study. So why EMI, or why this particular study in Kazakhstan? So as you all know, higher education around the world, they are going for internationalization. The university ranking, attracting international students, faculty. These are some of the reasons why there is a huge emphasis on internationalization. So Kazakhstan is no exception. Kazakhstan is also in this race for internationalization. English medium programs are increasing day by day. English medium universities and departments within the existing universities are transforming to English medium instruction. Our own university, Nazarbayev University, is an English medium university. So almost every program here is delivered with English medium instruction. And there is also a growing awareness and realization here in Kazakhstan that English is a global, lingua franca, and the first president of this country, way back in 2007, adopted this trilingual education policy, where he clearly stated that Kazakhstanis need to be proficient in 3 languages: Kazakh as their national language, Russian as the regional language, and English as international language. So since then, there is a growing number of English medium programs at school level as well as at in the universities. So, however, there were not many studies 3 years 3 years ago when we started. There were hardly any literature to see how this English medium education was working, how the trilingual education policy was being implemented, whether it's a success or what the challenges. So we wanted to study this to see the nature of challenges being faced by the graduate students, why we were interested in studying graduate student challenges, because we ourselves experience it. We are teaching at this university. We have very stringent admission policy. When we are admitting student to our master's program, they have to have 6.5 IELTS score, or they must have studied in English medium universities before. They do meet these admission criteria, but despite that, we see a lot of struggles that students go through when it comes to academic reading and academic writing in English. So it's more than just language proficiency that they need. And we will talk about it. So these were, the question you see on the screen. These were the initial question we started with, but certainly we had many more questions as we went to the field, as we administered our online survey first. Based on the survey results, we came up with many more questions to address. So when we share our findings with you, you can see the kind of question we have tried to address through this study. We used a mixed method design to conduct this study. We had an anonymous online survey that we administered to a larger sample from 10 English medium universities, or you can say 10 universities where there are offering program in English medium. So the survey was sent to master's students and PhD students, not undergrad students. And although we sent to many students, the response we got was only 320 responses. The reason, one reason for this is that this online survey is still a challenge in the context of Kazakhstan, because not every student has access to computer or internet. So paper-based survey is still useful in the context of Kazakhstan. Other than the survey, we interviewed graduate students. We had focus group discussions with master's students, PhD students, instructors teaching in English medium programs, English language instructors who are different than the regular faculty who teach content courses. Altogether, we had around 44 interviews, both individual and focus group interviews. So so here you can see that 320 responses, but out of them 269 were complete responses. Rest of them had, they had skipped one or two question or couple of question. So we didn't include them in our analysis. We only included 269 responses. And we saw that 56% of our participants were multilingual. They could speak 3 or more languages. Our survey had mainly close-ended question, but we also had a few open-ended question specific to challenges related to reading and writing in academic reading and writing. Also, their expectations from the program, the kind of support they get from their universities, and what other support that could be provided according to the participants. So if you look at the survey results, almost 67% participants said that they were somewhat satisfied with their English language proficiency. This is interesting that most of them had come through some kind of admission process, especially students from Nazarbayev University, Süleyman Demirel, Kimet. These 3 universities have quite stringent admission criteria. Even if they had certain IELTS scores, they still feel that they are not very satisfied with their English language proficiency. 65 think that they are not satisfied with their academic reading and writing in English, and 52% they believe that they are not, or they are somehow confident during oral presentation in English language. So you could see that these are quite significant percentages for students who are studying in English medium universities. It shows the challenges that they might be facing. 72.6% participant agreed, or they admitted that they do not enjoy reading in English, whether it's an academic reading or it's a reading for a pleasure purpose. They still like to read in Russian. Majority of them say that they would like to read in Russian if they had choice. 19% said in Kazakh, and only 2.4% said that they may enjoy reading in English or any other language. You can see the influence of Russian language. So even if Kazakhstan, is an independent country for the last 3 decades, it's an independent state, but the influence of the Russian language is still there. Master students, they had more issues in terms of their confidence, in terms of reading, in terms of their proficiency than the PhD students. Maybe yeah.
You can.
Okay. So what were some of the reason why they don't enjoy reading or writing in English, or why they are not satisfied with their language proficiency, or why they feel less confident in making presentation? One reason is lack of vocabulary. I think this came very frequently through the survey as well as through our interviews, that students as well as instructors, they admitted that they do not have enough vocabulary to explain, to articulate, their thoughts. Lack of reading and writing skills. Many students, they said that this is the first time they are in an English, medium instruction program, English medium program, and they are asked to read a lot of articles. They are asked to, do academic writing. They said that in their previous universities, in their previous programs, they didn't read beyond textbook or, or assigned readings. So this is one of the reason. This is, it's not just the language issue. It's a whole cultural issue of, reading. And like Pakistan, you don't see many people reading while they are in the park or while you are traveling with them in the plane. It's not like Europe or North America where almost every second person has a book in his or her hand. Here, it's I think it is starting, but it will take some time. Lack of exposure to English environment. This is another issue. Even if students are in English medium programs, the English speaking is confined to classroom. Even the class time, half of it is either in Russian or Kazakh. The other half could be in English. The moment they step out of the classroom, they switch to the Russian language or Kazakh language. The day-to-day conversation is not in English. The faculty members also engage with students more in the local languages than English language. And the country as a whole. So if I quote a research done a couple of years ago, I think it was Ahan and Smagulova. They say that Kazakhstan ranks quite at the bottom of countries ranking in terms of English language proficiency. So when you go to the market, go to the restaurants, there's very little English in most cities, except Almaty and Astana or Shymkent. These are the three cities where you can find people, communicate in English, but in other cities, still Russian and Kazakh languages dominate. So these were some of the reasons why these students and their instructors, struggle in English medium programs. So Professor Manan can, take it from here.
Right. Thank you very much, Professor Mir. In order to contextualize our discussion and our findings, I would also quote some excerpts from the papers that we have been able to gather. So I'll go back to the previous slide to just suggest why we call this transition as turbulent, this transition to the EMI policy as turbulent, because this happened quite dramatically and drastically without proper preparation. For example, one of the students said about this transition to the EMI policy in the universities. He said, it was difficult for me to go into this EMI atmosphere for academic studies and read all the research work. The articles were very challenging for me. The terminology did not have any meaning for me at first. And then I had to reread the same article several times. So this suggests why we call this transition as turbulent, as drastic and challenging. So there are some other quotations about how academic reading, how students find academic reading challenging for them to manage. For example, one of the students said that for me, reading text in the English language is extremely challenging as well as time consuming. Let me read this quote. According to him, the language English was very specific with specific terminology related to this program in this field of research. I remember I had spent a lot of time reading until very late at night and woke up the next day very early to cover all these readings, but still could not cover most of them. So this is an example of what students actually feel, what experiences they go through while managing text, while they are reading academic text. Now, let me quote something from the writing challenges that students encounter. one of the students said that I get so sad sometimes because I have great ideas, but I cannot express them well in writing. I cannot make it understandable to the readers. That is why I get lower marks, because I fail to express my ideas correctly. Another student also raises the same concerns. I do not have sufficient vocabulary to express my thoughts. I also do not have enough practice and experience with writing. I can understand what others say, but I cannot respond and write it because my vocabulary is not perfect and limited. So these quotations actually illustrate the nature of challenges that these students face with academic reading and writing. Now I'll move to the next slide. Now, when the kind of challenges and the degree of proficiency that students show, how teachers or instructors respond to languaging practices within the classrooms and what their linguistic orientations are. So there were very important findings about teachers' languaging practices, teachers' language preferences, the language choices they made in the classrooms. So we found three patterns in our data. There were teachers who are open to translanguaging or using multiple languages or switching between languages during their classrooms. And there was another category of teachers, although they admitted the fact, they recognized the fact that deploying or employing local languages such as Kazakh or Russian, they are really helpful in making course contents accessible and understandable for students. But they try to avoid it, especially within the classes, because these such translanguaging or permission to use local languages is against the official policies. And there were also teachers who were completely against language mixing or translanguaging. So let me read one of the quotes from all those three teachers. For example, one of the instructors said that the students don't understand content even when I instruct in Russian in the class, and then they go to the next class, which is in English. Thus, they struggle to grasp the course material. I have to repeat the material in Russian, in Kazakh, if the lesson is in English. I say, let's have a lesson in English. If you don't understand, we can gather again, because so here what we are trying to suggest is teachers, this category of instructors, they realize the gravity of the situation, and they understand the degree of challenges these students face, and they also appreciate the fact that local languages can be used as useful pedagogical resources to make the English content readable and understandable. On the other hand, we find a practice which we describe as guilty multilingualism. Guilty multilingualism, it has been used previously by several authors. I have myself used this during my research in the context of Pakistan. So it refers to a situation where teachers recognize the fact that using local languages as pedagogical resources can be helpful. It can allow better class participation and easy access to knowledge, but they still avoid it because the institutions or the universities or the management does not approve of these practices, right? And no to translanguaging is quite clear that teachers are completely in favor of English only a policy, rather than facilitating students with the local linguistic resources. I mean, using their L1s or the languages in which with which they are familiar. Oh, yeah. So, no, the study has got a number of implications. Since it was quite a broad, we studied this policy, the challenges of academic reading and writing. at various levels, and we were able to publish a number of research articles in some of the best journals. Maybe you can go and read them in detail. So we found this this transition as chaotic and stressful for a number of students and instructors. And what we find is that this policy seemed not to have worked well, because as we witnessed, there seems to be a disconnect between the policymakers, the macro level policy making of policymakers, and the preparation level on the ground, especially when it comes to preparing teachers and students to cope with the challenges of the EMI policy in general, and thereof academic reading and writing in particular. Our finding is that, so we conclude the ambitious goals of internationalization that we associate with the EMI policy, and such other aspirations like global competitiveness and human capital development through EMI cannot be achieved without careful planning, systematic implementation, and some appropriate support mechanisms for both students and instructors. So the way forward is to actually work a policy that is actually inclusive, that takes into account the various stakeholders at different levels, such as stakeholders at the macro level, stakeholders at the meso level, and stakeholders particularly at the micro level. So what we see kind of a disconnect between what the policymakers imagine and what level of preparation they made for this policy. So for us, this policy seems to be, as for now, as we see, as our data demonstrates, it's less promising. It's full of challenges for both instructors and students. And students, even there are students who go through certain emotional challenges, like I pointed out, they go through stress, depression, while they with the challenges of reading through English or writing. And would you like to add to that? Okay, so the way forward also is like what we understand is that there seems to be the school policy versus universities policy. There seems to be misalignment between both. So what our suggestion would be to the policymakers and all those concerned is to actually work on academic and reading, writing at the school level, because this transition is turbulent, because students are drastically exposed to a language which is entirely unfamiliar to them. So if students are exposed to a better and effective academic reading and writing environment, there is the likelihood that they might transition much more smoothly than they do now. And this, as far as effective policy making or policy planning is concerned, so there is a need for a holistic approach. What we observe is a kind of quick fixing and over ambitious planning without any groundwork. And and the way forward is a more inclusive approach towards, as I pointed out, one of the experts in language policy and planning, David Johnson, suggests a framework which he believes can work in context, right? So they can bridge gap and disconnect between various stakeholders. He describes this framework as non-traditional participation framework. This is what I pointed out. So this framework allows different stakeholders working at different layers to get understand each other, and then accordingly make policies, given the resources that are available in the context. So with this, I would conclude. And
yeah.
Would you like to add something more?
No, thank you, Professor Manan. So I think we can stop here. And if there are questions, we can have some discussion, I believe, if we have time.
Yeah, definitely. We have time for a few questions from the audience. Thank you so much for the presentation. And actually, I do have a few questions, but I would like to see if anybody else. And yeah, I want to remind the audience, if you don't want to speak up, you can just write in the chat and we will read the question for you. And but if we don't get anything right now, then I do have one question for the both of you. Thank you again for the wonderful presentation. And there is something I wanted to ask, which is related to what you said at the very beginning, rather than on the project itself, which was very interesting again. At the very beginning, you mentioned that in your, because we are both from Pakistan, from what I understood, and at the very beginning, you mentioned Pakistan is a different context because of its history. It used to be part of the colonies of the British Empire. And in your understanding, does that affect it differently from other contexts, like, for example, the context of Kazakhstan, this colonial heritage, the way EMI is implemented or understood there? Have you, in your experience, have you noticed any differences between these contexts?
Would you like to?
Yeah, certainly there is huge difference, Paulo. In Pakistan, English is very much everywhere. You see, there are English TV programs. Our national newspaper, one of the largest news or the media platform, is in English, the Dawn newspaper and the Dawn TV. And English is supposed to be the official language in Pakistan. So all official affairs are supposed to be done in English. They are done wherever there is a proficiency, but if you walk into the streets of any city, you will find not everybody, but a good number of people who can communicate with you in English. And the English medium schools started in Pakistan way back. With the creation of Pakistan, we also inherited some English, education system, and that continues. The context of Kazakhstan is very different. So English has started since 2007 when the policy was adopted. It started slowly, bits by bits, but it's growing in higher education, but still it will take time to develop the level of proficiency that is needed in the country. Professor Manan can say more because his entire research is in this particular area.
Thank you very much. This is his name. Yeah. So this is very interesting question and quite pertinent one, right, in the context of this research and in the context of understanding the similarities and differences of the socio-linguistic context that these two countries present, right? It is not to say that English is a colonial legacy in Pakistan, and it means that universities or students and instructors in Pakistan do not have problems with the EMI. We have equally I mean, it again depends on depends on which university you are in, which socio-economic background you come from, which geographical region you come from. The area where I happen to teach, right, Balochistan, one of the underdeveloped provinces, right, there all those students had nominal English medium schooling, but that was not sufficient to actually help them deal or cope with the challenges, especially dealing with the academic reading and writing challenges. I do have papers, they document students' challenges in that part of Pakistan, but there are universities in Pakistan where students from elite families, from privileged backgrounds, when they end up they end up quite successfully. So for them, so again, the challenges are there for Pakistan. This is not a new phenomenon, but in the context of Kazakhstan, English medium policy is a recent phenomenon. It does pose serious challenges, right? But the degree of challenges between Pakistan and Kazakhstan may not be comparable given the historical baggage that we have. Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much for your answers. I really appreciated it. I imagined that, even within the same country, there would be quite some diversity, but I really enjoyed your explanation a lot. Very, very nuanced. Thank you so much. We have quite a few questions, quite a few raised hands. I think the first one who raised the hand was Fuzia. Was that you? Do you have a question for our speakers? Okay. Fuzia is writing in the you can't unmute yourself. Then you can just write the question in the chat, perhaps. Yeah. And in the meantime, while you're writing, I think Sue Garton had a question next. We might ask her first. Hello.
There, I can get my video as well. Hello, thank you very much for that very interesting talk. Mine's more an observation, or rather sort of sharing similar experiences, and then I'd be interested to get your take on it. I've been part of an Erasmus project developing English medium instruction courses for agriculture and forestry in Kazakhstan and Mongolia. And we found we didn't work with students, we only worked with the staff, but they reported very similar issues to the ones that you found as well. And we addressed those, we tried to address them in two ways. One was through, we wait for the policy change, and we wait for the introduction of all the kind of training that clearly is necessary. We addressed it in two ways. One was through adopting a flipped learning model, so that the lecturers who were not proficient or not confident in English were able to prepare all the materials beforehand and then put them online, leaving class time for much more interactive and much more sort of student focused. And the other way we did it was by borrowing from English language teaching and making sure that with the reading, writing, presentations, oral work, that we introduce the kinds of activities that we use in English language teaching to support the comprehension and understanding of reading texts and to support the writing. Now, sadly, we were supposed to have been able to run this for a year, but external circumstances such as pandemics and invasions have meant that it's been badly delayed, and we haven't been able to get any feedback yet. But I'd be really interested to know from your study and from what you've found out, whether you think those would work or not. Will they have worked or won't they? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, this is a very relevant question. I really appreciate. We do come across literature where, one of the solutions that has been presented to us by experts. I was reading the other day an article by Ernest Macero, who has prolifically written about EMI policy. So, one of the solutions that he presented was to allow for a kind of collaboration between content teachers and English language specialists, right? So I think that would work. As I see, it would probably facilitate, especially content teachers who are less proficient in the English language, right? So, but we haven't seen any evidence of that kind of collaboration in the context of Kazakhstan. Alongside this project, I've been running a project on, EMI policy in mainstream schools where STEM subjects are taught through English language. So I couldn't see any evidence of that kind of collaboration between. But I agree with you. That would probably help these content teachers a lot, right? If some mechanism is developed where these English teaching specialists and content teachers could work and collaborate. Yeah, but again, it has to do with the resources, with the infrastructure, with the will of the policymakers. Yeah, so there are still question marks to that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. And I think we have a few questions in the chat, but we will get them later. I think Jinjun had a question. Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Do you hear me all right? Okay, cool. Thanks for the talk. It was very, very interesting. I just, so you mentioned at one point of the presentation that there's a lack of prior exposure to English environment. And I was wondering whether students have any opportunity to learn English before they go to university in Kazakhstan. You typically, can you talk us a little bit about how English education works in like secondary education or elementary education in that context, and whether there's any sort of continuity in language learning? Thank you.
Very quickly. So before this, historically, English was taught as one subject in schools. And then at foreign language department at universities. Since the trilingual education policy has been implemented, so you see a number of schools where English is now being used, like the Nazarbayev intellectual schools. They have this trilingual education policy, and also there are some private schools, but the mainstream schools, I think it's still the Russian language dominates or the Kazakh language dominates. I think the one subject that is being taught in English is, I think, not enough to develop the English language capacity that is required at higher education. So it depends, it varies from university to university, like Nazarbayev University, Süleyman Demirel or Kimep. Students do study in English at the undergraduate level. But in other universities, it is slightly different. So among our participants, you saw that 56% of them could speak 3 languages. That means they had exposure to English in their undergrad studies as well. But the other 44% did not have any exposure at all.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Let me add also one thing more as to what is the level of exposure, right, the students have at school level in Kazakhstan. In the urban areas, especially in the larger cities, we do see a trend of sort of these private academies mushrooming quite exponentially, right? So again, so they do offer such preparatory courses to those students who feel that their English language proficiency is insufficient. But again, it has to do with your socio-economic background. Not all students in Kazakhstan can afford actually attend these private language academies. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So we have quite a few questions in the chat, and
Yeah.
one the Q&A from Bruce Howell. I don't remember which one was first. I guess I will read Bruce Howell's question first, which is there any negative feeling against EMI in Kazakhstan, or do people agree with it despite the chaos and stress?
I think this is interesting question. Yeah. I think generally, our one of our publications from this study, talks about the people perceptions about EMI, and generally it is received quite positively. It's a policy that is kind of now kind of negotiated and accepted that this is going to be the reality. Within those positive responses, there are some critical questions also. Some of our participants raised this question that why English? What will I do with my English? They raised some practical questions, such as the job market in Kazakhstan still requires proficiency in Russian and Kazakh. So with my English degree, where would I go? Am I being educated to leave the country, go, to another country, English-speaking country? And then there were some identity-related concerns that how, who am I? Am I a Kazakh, Russian-speaking, English-speaking, or a mix of all those three? So there are concerns. Some other people had, again, practical concern, like, were we ready to implement this policy? Would it not have been better to first, to go, slowly, develop capacity, maybe at the secondary school level, then go into higher education, or we are doing some kind of, quick fixing here and there. So yes, there are these concerns as well, but generally speaking, I think most participants were quite, positive about it, even if they feel that there are issues, challenges, stress associated with it, but they see the future prospect of it. They think that it is good for future.
Thank you very much, Professor Mir. I also have some insights into this very issue, right? And while collecting data from the mainstream schools, especially from the STEM's teachers and the school principals there, what we found was that overall the teachers and school principals were quite positive about the introduction of EMI for STEM subjects in Kazakhstan and EMI in general. But they did raise up. There was also a kind of a difference across age. So age was, for example, those who were relatively younger teachers, they received it more positively than those teachers who were about to retire, especially the elderly generation, the older generation of teachers. They of course, they could not resist it openly, but they were not happy with the policy because they said that we studied German as a foreign language. We were not exposed to English either as a subject or as a medium. But now at this stage of our career, we are certainly asked to teach through English, which we have not been doing throughout our academic careers. So that particular generation is more reluctant, but they do not say openly. Yeah.
Right. I hope that answered the question, and yeah, I can see people are being happy about that. So we have still a few questions in the chat, but Patrick, I see your hand. Would you like to? Hello.
Hello. Could you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Professor, for your insightful and thought-provoking talk on EMI. I'm from Japan, and we also have the EMI policy, and we also have something similar. We also face the same challenges. So most of us teachers, what we did was we tried to adopt translanguaging in the classroom, because we know that it's almost impossible to teach students all that need to know just using English, because a lot of them do not have enough sufficient English proficiency. So I want to ask about the attitudes towards translanguaging in the classroom, because I read that one of the lecturers said that I don't care if you don't understand, I will just use English. So I was just wondering, what is the overall teachers' attitude towards translanguaging, and as well as the administrator's viewpoint towards using translanguaging in the classroom? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patrick. It's very interesting question, right? And what we observed was that it depends on which university you are in, right? There are a couple of private EMI universities in Kazakhstan, quite prestigious, and right. And there the tendency is more towards English only a policy. Like some of the teachers, they privately told us that we realize the fact, we recognize the fact that some of our students who come from the rural background, particularly, they need our support through translanguaging or through a kind of facilitating them with more openness to languaging rather than imposing English only policy or practice. But there is also a pressure on part of the management. We are being monitored, so we tend to sort of negotiate it in a intelligent manner, right? But overall, teachers in those contexts are more inclined towards pushing for EMI than for an open languaging strategy. But as far as the case in other local universities, government universities is concerned, their teachers tend to accept this reality, and they tend to negotiate their instructional approaches, their language use according to the needs of the learners. So this is what I have observed. That is the overall trend. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question, Patrick. We're running a little bit out of time, but I would say let's still try and answer the questions we have in the chat. And if people do have to go, the session is still being recorded, so you will be able to hear the answer when we upload the video online. But the next question is actually, I think it's very close to what Patrick just asked, and that's from Rima. She asks, how would you deal with the no to translanguaging in EMI classroom?
Thank you very much. Again, this is a very interesting issue, at the same time a challenge as well. What we could see, like personally, my specialization is multilingual education, so we deal with the challenges of how studying through an unfamiliar language could cause challenges, right? So as far as the strategy or dealing with the no to translanguaging position is, we would say that in order to actually bring about or change this particular belief, we need to spread what Garcia describes as critical multilingual language awareness amongst teachers, right? There are other scholars who talk about language as a problem orientation, language a resource orientation, right? So here, we need to spread awareness and inculcate in teachers, especially it becomes part of your teacher training policy, right? To actually inculcate or educate teachers about the usefulness of translanguaging, or the usefulness of using students' whole linguistic repertoire as resources. So it has to do with a kind of ideological transformation of teachers, and sort of dismantling these monoglossic beliefs about languages. The more the languages, the more the potential for inclusion, class participation, and better learning and teaching environment. So for that, we need to change the orientations, and that could be done through a teacher training. And for teacher training to become effective, we need to inform the policymakers about the gravity of this situation and the the importance of how teacher training could play a vital role in kind of transforming orientation about this no to trans language.
Thank you for answering the question. And actually, if I can add something, I used to be a teacher in an EMI context, even though, you know, my theoretical knowledge on EMI was essentially zero. But it's funny because I was in a situation where I thought I don't think translanguaging had a name yet when I started teaching, but that's essentially what I did, even though the policy said, oh, don't use the students L1 in classroom. And what I did was like, I ignored that. I just did it anyway, because what are we going to do? Are we going to fire me for using Chinese in a Chinese classroom? And yeah, so I think we have time for at least one more question. And then if you feel like it, we can go through the rest, but it depends on you. So the next question is, I wonder if there is any collaboration between English lecturers or the English department and content lecturers and content department to come up with a pedagogy or support to the students.
Hello, hi. Can you hear me? Hello.
Hello,
Hi.
yeah.
Yeah, the question is from me. So thank you very much for this interesting sharing. It's very similar to what Sue just now asked. So it is partly answered in terms of collaborating between content teachers and language teachers. And I heard your response saying that there are restrictions in terms of resources, and I do understand that kind of like restrictions and all. But if I may add, is like is there any kind of like arrangement in terms of giving what we call professional development courses or professional development workshops, which are conducted by the language teachers for the content teachers? Because if I may share, is like in the Southeast Asian context, which I'm more familiar with, it's quite similar. Like there are content teachers who are trying to teach the content in English, and they don't. In most universities, there are not enough English language teachers to help them or to work with them for every courses or every program that they teach in. So one kind of like a suggestion is for English language teachers to give some kind of professional development courses or workshop to learn something like, for example, task-based learning or classroom discourse, for example. Yeah. So what is your reaction on that? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This is again a very relevant question and quite important one. I think partly we discussed this thing, right, about the collaboration between content teachers and English specialist teachers. We didn't see any evidence of that, right? But the other part was like, yeah, there was, you were talking about some professional development programs. Yeah, I like, as far as I see, at the school levels, when this EMI policy was introduced for STEM subjects in the mainstream schools in Kazakhstan, the Ministry of Education did develop some policy for teachers' professional development. But again, since this country is using this policy, implementing this policy, or working on this policy for the first time, so again, there were a number of loopholes identified by experts, by researchers, in the way this, teacher development took place. Like my respondents from the schools, they complained that the so-called professional training that they were offered was insufficient in a sense, and they were not given enough time, for example, to develop their professional capacities as to how to teach English, how to teach content through English language, right? The first complaint was about insufficient time, and it also varied across the country. Like some teachers were offered 3 months training, some teachers were offered 6 months training, and some teachers were offered 9 months training. And then again, there was inconsistency or inconsistent policy about this professional training, because the institutions that were actually assigned the job to train these teachers were different. So the different institutions that they trained these teachers trained them quite differently, right? Not only in terms of material or the focus of the training, but also the assessment criteria was quite varied and different. So at the end of the day, teachers ended up with different forms of professional training and different forms of understanding this EMI policy. For example, there was also another flaw, a kind of a limitation of the professional training that it was offered. The teachers complained that the training particularly focused on their speaking and listening skills, as if they were learning English language rather than learning about teaching content through English language. So again, that was one of the limitations that was pointed out. The training did not cater to their needs as professionals as to how to deal with academic reading and writing. So in order to actually address these deficiencies or these limitations, we suggest that teachers, particularly those teachers who are assigned to teach content through English language, they since their overall career, they have not studied English language, or they have not been trained as to how content should be taught through English language. They need some basic applied linguistics courses, some basic understanding of some foundational concepts of applied linguistics, of English language teaching, or at least of CLIL, so as to actually to get to know the complexities of. So I think this is what I believe is a holistic approach needs to be taken. So the focus should not be only on the English language proficiency, but also on the overall pedagogical preparation and overall sort of theoretical exposure to them as to how learning through a second or a foreign language works. But teachers were not really given that kind of training, as teaching language, especially a foreign language, could be a very complex phenomenon. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That really kind of like I mean, like I can relate to your points. Firstly, is in terms of the resistance. You put it as like complaints, so-called complaints, resistance from the EMI teachers, like like the content teachers, like when they are asked to do professional development courses. It's very common. Like some studies have been done, for example, in the context of Korea as well. There's some kind of resistance or some kind of like limitations. And also I'm glad that you mentioned applied linguistics courses. So the project that I recently did is like in terms of how we can adapt applied linguistics curriculum for the especially for the EMI professionals. So yeah, you're right that I mean, I do agree with you that it's not just like learning English, speaking, reading, and writing. They should have some kind of foundational knowledge about like how language works in the classroom context, for example. Yeah. Okay, so thank you very much for sharing, because I mean, the first time I heard about such similar kind of situations in your context, which is very valuable for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So we're really running out of time, but Fuzia, I think Fuzia really deserves an answer to her question for waiting so long. Any exposure at the university under EAP programs?
English for academic purposes. Did you see any evidence?
I think only at Nazarbayev University, there is a foundation program where I think there are some EAP related courses offered in that program. This is for students who cannot get into the master's program directly because of their language and literacy skills. They are put into 1-year foundation program where they get EAP courses. Other than that, we did not see at any other universities here.
No.
All right, I think that answers the questions. Thank you so much to both of you for the presentation and for answering so many questions from the audience. Thanks to the audience for asking such questions. And again, sorry we ran a little bit over time, but you will find the video uploaded on YouTube and the other platforms next week. Probably on Monday, you will already be able to access it. And if you would like to participate in any other seminars, we will be sending you an update on what's going on next month before the end of January. But once again, thanks everybody involved. And I hope to see you again in the next seminar.